Welcome, class number 5 of Art and Soul. So as you know, we've been exploring various art forms in the context of Judaism and its relevance to our own lives. And tonight we will continue with the exploration, and we will be taking a look at clothing, at fashion, the art of fashion. Clothing can change all the time. We change our clothes with the weather, the season, perhaps with the fashions that come and go. But at the same time, despite the seeming superficial aspect to clothing, the fact that we always, we put on clothes, take them off, we discard clothing, we buy new clothing, and we don't even think about it. Nonetheless, clothing has a very strong impact on us. It really affects how we perceive ourselves, how others perceive us. Wow. And that's what we will be looking at further, in a deeper sense, tonight. We'll begin with a little workshop. A woman by the name of Carol Jackson wrote a book that became quite famous called Color Me Beautiful. Is anyone familiar with this book? It came out in the 80s and became a very popular read with women. What it is she took the ideas of a woman named Suzanne Cagle, who was a color theorist. And she had done a whole work of applying different seasons, different personalities. It was quite complex. Carol Jackson, who herself is a psychologist, took this work and simplified it, applying one personality per season and developing a system how women can figure out which season they are based on coloring, skin tone, hair color, eye color. And once a woman can figure out her season, then she knows what colors look best on her because there's certain colors associated with each season, and it makes shopping for clothing, for makeup, for accessories that much easier, and you're more guaranteed to buy something that you're actually going to use because it looks good. Because I could speak from experience, I've bought many, many things that I never ended up using and just sat in my closet because I never felt they looked good on me. So it's actually very practical to get a sense of what works. In the long run, I guess you save money because you end up using what you have instead of buying more things, right? So the little workshop that we are going to begin our class with tonight is based on Carol Jackson's book, Color Me Beautiful. We are going to try to determine our seasons and thus figure out which colors look good on us. Now, of course, this is really a large, complex subject. It's something, if you go get your colors done, it could take hours. So obviously, we're only touching the surface of it, but it does give us a good idea. And aside from being practical, being that we're talking about clothing tonight and fashion, it's also a nice introduction to some of the ideas that we will be exploring tonight and discussing at length. So, as I mentioned before, there are 3 things we need to determine in order to figure out our season. Number 1 is the undertone of our skin. Number 2 is our hair color, and number 3 is our eye color. Now, the most complicated step here is determining our undertone, the undertone of our skin. Undertone, as opposed to overtone, is determined by 3 elements present in our blood, in our body, which are hemoglobin, carotene, and melanin. Those are the 3 elements that determine our undertone, our skin undertone. And whereas our skin overtone can change, suntan, sun exposure, illness, blood pressure fluctuations, our skin undertone is genetic. It's not affected by any external factor.
What was the third? Hemoglobin, carotene, and
melanin.
Melanin.
Melanin. So in order to determine if you are a warm tone or a cool tone, which is important to know when figuring out your season, we need to take a good look at our skin undertone. And there are 3 ways we can do it. And the more ways you do this test to figure out your undertone, the more of a sense you will have of what your undertone is. Some of the tests work much better in natural light, but we'll have to work with what we have for tonight. So if you notice, there's various tools here out on the table. There are plates with foundation. There are silver and gold color papers, and there are mirrors. Now the mirror you're pretty much just going to need for the foundation test. The third test, you don't actually need anything to do the test, you simply need to look at your own veins. So let's begin with the foundation test. Now ladies, feel comfortable. If it's not something you feel comfortable doing, that's fine. As I said, you don't need to do all 3 tests even to determine your undertone. It's totally how you feel. Now, taking a look at the foundation, do you notice a difference between the 2 blobs there? What would you say the difference is?
I would say one is like beigeier and one maybe more reddy, like
One's warm and one's cool.
Well, that's true. Yes, one is warm, one's cool. And what would you say in terms of the color of them? What's the difference between the warm one and the cool one?
More yellow, warm yellow.
Okay, one is more of a yellow tone, and one is more of a red or a pink tone.
This is very interesting, because you're talking warm and cold. Are you guys thinking that the warm is the beigeier one?
So that's what I was just going to ask you. Can anyone tell which is which?
I would have thought the reddier one was warmer.
No, yellow tone is a warm tone, and pink is cool.
Really?
Okay, and could you all tell, I mean, which is which? Which is the yellower one and which is the pinker one? That's pretty self-understood.
The pinker one, right? The dark is the
Yeah,
pinker one?
exactly. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take a dab, and this is where the mirrors come in, and we'll have to share the mirrors. I don't have enough, unfortunately. Put a dab of the warm tone foundation on your cheek, and put a dab of the pink tone on your cheek, and rub them both in.
Same cheek or different cheeks?
Doesn't matter.
What is this then?
And then,
Sorry.
what were you asking?
Sensitive skin, so I'm
It's
reluctant.
so you might not want. It's a cheap foundation. So it might not be great for your skin.
The under part of your arm is a tube.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that there as well. When you're ready, when you have it rubbed in, take a look in the mirror. The color that just blends right into your skin would be your skin tone, as opposed to the one that just kind of looks painted on. Okay, there will be one that kind of just sits there. That's like, looks like you painted it, and one that really becomes part of your skin. Okay, see which one does which.
If I ever thought I'd be going to a class like this, I wouldn't. Maybe this is like since grade 7.
This looks artificial.
Malky, can you hand the Kleenex?
Yes, actually, that's why I put it here, because I figured everyone's going to need it for this workshop.
Yellow, yeah, I would have thought. Let me see you.
Isn't it interesting? Almost automatically, it's
That's yellow.
this one here is like, oh.
Yeah, this one on me.
So Natalia, which one do you feel works better for you? Which one is that?
The yellow one.
The warm tone. Interesting. You also a warm tone?
Yeah.
The cool one.
You the cool one?
Me too.
Me too.
See, that's the.
I didn't put it on now, but the cool. I tried it before. I do better with the
I
cool
find
one.
it in between.
The
but
pink
I put
one.
it on my arms.
See, that's what I think with this person that I saw there. I think his
I don't
color
like that one.
didn't agree with what he.
No, this
The
one.
yellow
Yeah.
made him handsome.
There you go.
And the rest,
You're not
he was
sensitive.
no bad.
You'll see when we look at the color palettes.
Doesn't matter.
Oh.
Okay, let's move on to the next skin test. The gold and the silver. Okay, if you have warm skin tone, your hand will look better on the yellow paper, as opposed to if you have cool skin tone, your hand will look better on the silver. So take a piece of silver, a piece of gold, put one hand on each, and see on which paper your hand sort of blends in better, as opposed to looking kind of mottled and off. And for this one, it is better natural light. So if you can't quite tell, don't worry.
I can't. I just feel better with this.
Yeah,
Generally, the colors that you really like and that you're attracted to very often are the ones that look good on you. Not always, but often that's you could trust your intuition and things like colors that you're over and over again attracted to.
Because you said to see which one that your hand sort of blends with, and one that it just sits there. So,
Gold? Okay, so far you're consistent with the foundation, with the gold, okay?
This one is actually cold.
The silver is cool, yes.
Silver is cool and gold is warm.
Gold is warm.
Yeah, I can feel a temperature difference too.
But this is cold.
Silver.
This one,
So you're also pretty consistent.
Good side.
What about you?
You wiped it off. It's good now.
Go away.
I can tell already between your glasses and your scarf. You know what you are.
Should I go?
sometimes when people have makeup that's wrong for them, that's why they look.
Shoes to the went very fast.
So that's what that is.
There's been to find
I
it.
don't know.
So I thought, oh, you have to something has to match.
It's perfect. You always look great. Okay, let's go on to the last
Are you
test.
actually wearing makeup now?
I am.
Yes, she
Are you wearing
is.
foundation and everything?
You can tell.
Yeah.
I see, it's natural.
It's better if you can't tell, right? That's how, I guess, that's what they say. Supposed to look natural. Just supposed to enhance your features. It's not supposed to look like you painted yourself.
Yeah, you're not supposed to look basic,
Hair,
you're
you
supposed
can,
to.
you can change. So,
Right, so you have to go according to your natural color.
but actually, the natural look that's like in some, also with curly and some people, they're curly, they make straight,
Right.
and they don't really look.
It's true. It's true. The way Hashem made us, I guess, is the way we look best, right?
Yeah, the way they were created.
The way we were created. Okay, so the third test for skin tone. Take a look at your inner wrist, the veins there. Again, easier natural light, but I'll give it a try. If your veins look more bluish, you have cool tones. If your veins look more greenish, then you have warm tones.
Oh, how do I tell?
Blue veins is cool, and greenish is warm in terms of your vein color.
Greenish, and the other one is what you say?
Green or blue.
Yeah, all blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have all blue. So this is what?
I'm in
Cool.
between, I'm telling you, I
Cool.
know, I'm
But it's hard to,
supposed to be a
And
winter.
the thing is when they're in spring. although-
that makes sense actually. Yeah. I would say that too, based on what we're going to learn. Okay, so how did everyone do with the skin tone? Have an idea? Cool versus warm? Okay. So now, the next two steps are actually quite easy because I think we're probably pretty much familiar with our eye color and hair color.
Mine's changing.
Just make a conscious, take a moment to consciously be aware of your eye color. Is it light? Is it dark? Your hair color, is it light or is it dark? And now what we're going to do is we're going to merge all these steps to discover your season. Okay? So take a look over here. This is winter eyes and hair. Okay? So if you have one of these eye colors and these hair colors, you are fitting into the winter season. In terms of hair and eye. Well, we're going to add the skin tone in a minute, actually. Let's first take a look at this. Okay? Then you have summer.
This is,
Summer or spring?
This is summer.
Summer.
This is summer. Again, we didn't factor in skin tones yet, okay? This is just eyes and hair. It's just to give you an idea. Then we have autumn.
I have, used to have red highlights.
You go according to your overall hair color, I would say.
What it used to be or what it is now?
It's interesting because if you're talking about dyed hair, you do go to the natural color. But I have heard that when a person's hair naturally grays, it does change their palette somewhat.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you can start wearing different colors. In fact, I think the gray showed up in the winter. And here's spring. Here's spring.
See, it's more pink.
Now, if you have light hair and eyes with a cool skin undertone, that makes you a summer. If you have dark hair and eyes with a cool undertone, that makes you a winter. If you have light hair and eyes with a warm undertone, makes you a spring. And if you have light hair and light eyes with a cool undertone, dark hair and dark eyes with a warm undertone, that makes you an autumn. So autumn and winter are both for the dark hair and dark eyes, but autumn is warm tone and winter is cool tone. Spring and summer are both lighter hair and lighter eyes, but spring is warm tone and summer is cool tone.
But I would call myself dark hair and light eyes.
So that's why these charts are helpful, because it kind of shows you the different combinations that could fall under one season. Because it's not as simple as that, as just brown eyes, brown hair, you're this, and blue eyes. Because obviously we know there's so many variations amongst people.
I think I have dark hair. Yeah, I would say I have dark hair.
Well, you used to.
Yeah.
So, and you have lights, cool or warm?
I thought I was cool.
Cool. So that would place you either summer or winter. So if you take a look at the winter one, see if you could find your hair and eyes in there. You said you have green?
Green.
So I would say with the dark hair, the green eyes, you probably are a winter, because there is a shade of green in the winter, as opposed to summer. And I'm not an expert, so don't take me at my word for it. But this is just what I'm thinking.
This is really your element.
You could tell.
Well, there is a dark hair option in the summer as well,
No,
but it's more of a brighter green, a darker, more intense green. So in the eye. So I guess it depends if you have a lighter green or a more intense green.
Okay, so winter or summer. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's take a look at your palettes. So once you figured out your seasons, kind of, so some of us have a harder time with it than others, different combinations. But once we figure that out, we can look at the colors that suit you. So here we have, in the top, you have the autumn colors, and the bottom we have the winter colors. So this is dark hair, dark eyes, but different skin tones. Top is the warm skin tones, the bottom is the cool skin tones.
I can feel.
Any of you feel like some of those colors speak to you more than others?
Where
More
does
the
the-
winter or more the autumn?
Where does the black fit?
Winter.
Okay.
Although there is a black in autumn as well, but I think
It's a
traditionally
different
it's
kind.
winter. They say only winters can wear black and white. That's what they say. And then we have the colors of spring on the top, again with the warm undertones, and the colors of summer on the bottom with the cool undertones.
I think so, eh? I feel more like...
I wanted to actually print them out for you. I apologize, my printer was not doing well with colors, so there really was no point in printing these out. But this gives you an idea.
Well, are you getting that off of a site on the internet? Or is that your own personal...
It's not off a site, but you could, if you just Google, I did this once actually, just Google color palettes
Yeah.
or Color Me Beautiful or whatever, you'll get so many hits and you'll definitely find something there.
Where did you get this sweater? It's totally
I'll tell you after the class, all my secrets. But thank you. Okay, so we now have an idea of how the clothing we choose, the styles and the colors, enhance our physical look. What we're going to explore now is how clothing can also enhance our personalities, our identities. Why?
Sorry,
Enhanced personality and
just a
what?
memory.
Identity.
No, sure. I hope we could. I think it's great.
Okay, so let me start with the question.
Go ahead.
Okay? Why do we wear clothes?
Excellent.
Now, I don't mean, I want to add,
Seriously.
I like what
it is, but I want to add something first before we start to discuss. I'm not talking on a practical level.
Feel it in person.
Okay, obviously there's practical reasons to wearing clothes, to protect us from the elements, to protect our privacy. But if those were the only reasons for wearing clothes, we could do just fine with a sack. Okay? So why do we have this whole fashion industry? Why do we just spend 20 minutes trying to figure out which colors look best on us? If it's just about being practical with our clothing, then we don't need to know all that. So really, in terms of fashion, in terms of trends, in terms of all the shopping and all the stores and all the retail that's out there, why? Why do we choose clothing? Why do we
Because all the world
care about
is
our clothing?
stage.
Meaning?
True.
Barbara, would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, because we go out there and we have certain personae that we live in this world or want to. So you can actually change that. I mean, you can be consistent, or you can go out there and change your clothes, your makeup, your hairstyle, I mean, all of that together, and project a different kind of personality, persona. So Shakespeare's right. All the world's a stage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very, very interesting, Barbara, what you're saying. So you're saying basically our clothing enables us to project a certain image to the world.
It does, and it also,
You
I
made a
think,
statement with
maybe enhances what how we
Make a
already
statement.
feel.
Good.
Yeah.
And what was the last
It
thing you
can
said?
also
It enhances
enhance
what?
how we already feel, but that's
Okay.
the same thing. Like what kind of energy we feel we have, or you know, like for myself, sometimes I really want to protect my energy. I don't want to go out there sharing it all. Like it feels too vulnerable. So then, probably wear more black. No, yeah, things that,
You
could.
make people not notice you leaving.
No, but that keeps it, it keeps more of it in, or draws it down. Or, you know, or if you go, so it projects out, and it also, it's what you want to be and also who you are. Like both sides clothing can facilitate that. It's a kind
It
of
also-
facilitator.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
What you said has to do with the attractiveness you want to feel, the level of attractiveness to yourself and to others. So if you don't want to be attractive, there's a certain way. And if you want to attract women or men or children, you dress in certain ways.
That's true. And so, in a sense, you could say clothing really affects our mood.
Absolutely.
You know, it makes us feel good about ourselves, or it can just it could emphasize our negative feelings about ourselves. Yeah,
Slopping around in a nasty old house coat.
it's true.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I know that when I wear black, I'm totally drained. That really drains me.
And that's interesting because if you ask somebody else, perhaps how they feel in black, perhaps they feel really confident in black.
Yeah.
See, not me.
So there's no one way to use clothing. It's clothing is very much connected, as we just saw through the workshops, connected to you personally. So clothing's not so simple. On one hand, we look at clothing as kind of superficial, but on the other hand, clothing is very personal.
It is.
So when we wear clothing, is it more for ourselves? Our choices of clothing more for ourselves? Or do they revolve more around other people, would you say?
Me, I'd say myself.
For example, okay, when you're dressing in the morning to go out to work, or you're dressing to meet a friend for coffee, or you're dressing for an evening out, are you more concerned with your comfort and how you feel in your clothes and your own personal taste? Or are you thinking more about what type of event, so what kind of clothing are suitable for that type of event? Or are you thinking about the types of people that are going to be there and how you want to appear in front of those people?
I would say the first. I would, for me, it would be
I have to be comfortable.
Okay.
I have confidence by being comfortable. If I have to do something for somebody else in that regard, then I would not. I would
You want to feel
choose
yourself.
Something that would make you
What
comfortable
was the
given its
statement?
purpose.
The
Yeah,
way
it
you
wouldn't
want
be
to be addressed.
inappropriate.
No,
So you would be
The
judging
way
it
you want to
also.
be
Ah.
addressed.
Very nice. Rania just said a very nice statement.
what's that?
Dress the way you want to be addressed.
Dress the way you want to be addressed.
Right.
And that's actually going to tie in beautifully to something that we're going to be discussing in a bit. Take a look in your student books. I'm not sure what page it's on in your book. It's a survey.
Page 155.
155, thank you, Rivka. It's a survey, and it's a survey about what determines your clothing choices. So it's a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being myself, just me, I determine my clothing choices, and 10 being it's just my impact on others that is determining my clothing choice, and you have everything in between. 6. Where would you put yourself on that scale?
This is a
We
very
will.
big question.
Yes.
Yes, I'd rather not if I could. Unless we go back to Adam and Eve.
It depends on the day.
I would say most of us are a bit of both, right? Probably most people are a combination. We are thinking in terms of what we're comfortable wearing. Like you were saying, Natalia and Barbara, you were saying before, we don't always want to really put ourselves out there so much. So it has to be our comfort level, and we take that into account. And of course, our personal taste. Our taste is not usually only determined by what other people like. We have our own personal taste. But on the other hand, like Renia mentioned, and it's 100% true, we like to make an impression on people. There's a certain impression we want to make. So we are also thinking about the people. And also we want to be dressed appropriately for whatever event or venue or situation I'm going into. Whether, I'm not going to wear my heels and my black formal dress to work, right? But I'm also not going to wear, my casual sweatshirt to a fancy dinner party. And those are the extreme examples. But, we feel like we want to be dressed appropriately. We take that into account also. So I would say some of us lean more towards one side than the other side, but I think we could probably find both elements in our choices.
Well, I think when you're dressing appropriate, you're doing that for yourself. I don't want to be, I guess right now, for example, I went to a do where everybody was dressed, and they're very wealthy, and they're obviously all this, and I was very simple. But I feel good about myself, so that doesn't matter.
So it doesn't matter to you. Right, and even then, if you say, well, like, it's important to me to be dressed appropriately, that's dressing, yes, maybe there's the element of dressing for yourself in there, but it's in the context of other people. Because if you were just alone in your home and it was really only up to you, you wouldn't necessarily. So it's in the context of interaction with other people.
But sometimes even by yourself, you want to, for yourself, you want to be presentable.
Yes, like Rivka was saying, it affects your mood. Sometimes, you feel better when you're presentable and you're not in your pajamas the whole day. Right.
Well, it's interesting. I was living in the country for a while, and I slumped around mostly. I mean, that was what my life there. And there were some days that I literally got all dressed up to go and do my grocery shopping, just because I wanted to have an excuse to dress up nice. Now, maybe people thought I was a lunatic.
But you walk in the seawall in your pajamas.
True, but I've done it for years.
You're telling all Aura's secrets tonight.
So what's the difference? It's the same.
But that's what I'm saying. So I mean, I'm known to do lots of things in my pajamas. So sometimes I really felt like dressing up, and there was nowhere to go. So I just said, I'm just going to get all dressed up and I'll go do my shopping. It's like. So.
There was a time in my life.
All for yourself.
For me, it's all
for you all in your pajamas.
This
must
is
be
it.
for yourself.
Right. You want to be comfortable.
It's for the vegetables.
Yes.
There was a time in my life when I was
and
teaching.
I always had my shade on.
And
Really, good for you. That's not easy to do.
One woman amongst about
and then when I had
50
my
men.
job, I was always ready. But I
And
felt like even in
at
front
first-
of, if someone even in my husband gets it or something in the moment, so you don't want to be,
Right. Right.
Okay,
It's
Rivka would like to
for
share. Did
yourself,
she do
even.
that?
I would say like I'm kind of on 7, 8 on in the scale.
Okay, Rivka.
there was a time
Interesting.
when I was teaching theater arts, and I had to spend some time on the floor doing exercises and warm-ups and relaxation and things like that. And at first I did it in skirts or, really fashionable
Not a good thing.
pants and things. This was back in the 70s. And I wore nice clothes and they looked good and whatever, but I was one woman teacher amongst 50 men. And I was so uncomfortable because they all just made such remarks about how I looked, and they did it was really ugly. So I started dressing so I wouldn't attract them. And I found that I was far more comfortable on the job and on the street when nobody really noticed me. So baggy tops, jeans, or just loose pants. My hair was indifferently cut. I just consciously dressed down so I wouldn't attract the attention I was attracting, because I hated it.
See, these are good.
So that's
I think
another
these are
twist
really
in-
good points. I mean,
Yeah.
I think so. Like, I mean, even used to, you know, to disguise your, but to blend in the back. I mean, like, I think maybe we all go through phases like that.
And when I'm with women, it's very, very different, because I like to say, hey, it's me, and I feel good.
Yeah,
And
look at
Right.
How are you doing?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't feel any kind of bullying, or I don't fear anything when I'm with women. Well, most women.
They can be catty too, but most.
You know, just to tag along, I bought a pair of platform shoes a year, 2 years ago. Anyway, a year and a half. Yeah. Anyway, it was so different. When I wore those shoes and I went to an art opening, I felt like I was treated so differently.
Yeah.
It's like the whole world was different. I loved it. It was terrific. And it, you know, just because it added a certain amount of height, and I usually wear flat shoes, and they were like, I had to be really careful how I walked in these shoes. And I was wearing pants, didn't matter. I tell you, the world was different. I think I projected something different out there. And believe me, I know all about dress up. Ask for it. I have 2 closets full of like incredible. So, you know, but this was different. It was about the shoes, because for me that was a big leap.
Standing taller. Oh, God.
And they're great shoes. Actually, drew them in my
Well,
art class.
6-foot Rivka in
Yes.
3-inch
You would
platforms.
be unreal.
Hello.
Exactly. So just, you know, what you wear does. And
Yeah.
the world can change.
But there's
You and
something-
how
So,
it
you know-
looks you.
There's another thing that really affects how people react to you. It's a smile. If you stand up straight and you're smiling and you're happy,
Totally.
wow,
Yeah.
do you attract attention. If you're just sort of slumping along and you don't look very happy, nobody pays any attention at all.
Rivka, that's an
So
excellent point,
true.
and we're actually, it might not seem connected to clothing per se, but we're going to get to that towards the end of the class. Okay, so let's hold that thought, because you're right.
Even in my pajamas, everyone on the seawall smiles at me because I'm always smiling.
I'm not surprised.
But especially with the pajamas.
And if I want
Okay, so ladies, let's pull together all the wonderful, insightful comments that you have made so far about the purpose of our clothing. So it seems like it boils down to a couple of things. The clothing we choose projects an image to other people. It also sends a message to ourselves.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? So with regards to projecting an image to other people, through our clothing, we could really cultivate any sort of image, any sort of way we want people to view us. And we could change that. That can be changed up all the time. And it could even be something that we feel is so contrary to our innate personality. But if we don't want people to view us a certain way, and we prefer to be viewed a different way, which is maybe not so natural to me, we could cultivate that through our choices in clothing. Our clothing send a message to people, this is who I am, or this is how I would like to be perceived. To the extent that sometimes our identity even merges with that image. That image that we work so hard to cultivate through our clothing and project to other people, we begin to identify with that image. And not necessarily in such an extreme way. I mean, how many times do we take a look at a piece of clothing and we say, oh, that's so me? We begin to identify with our choice of clothing. Or another example, sometimes you come across somebody wearing the same article of clothing that you have, even if you're not wearing it at the moment, but you say, oh, I have that same shirt. I don't know about you, but I always feel this kind of jolt. It feels so strange and awkward to me to see someone else wearing a piece of clothing that I have. And I was thinking about it, and I realized because that piece of clothing, I identify with that clothing. I feel like that shirt expresses me. It's part of me. When I wear it, it takes on my personality. It's so weird to see it expressing someone else's personality. So we really begin to identify with the image we create through our clothing, an image that we seek to project to other people for the way they want them to view us.
When I find somebody wearing something I'm so happy. I compliment it.
Yes, that too.
Daniela and I turned up at Dina's one night, and we were both wearing exactly the same eggplant-colored slinky top and bottom, ankle-length skirts, and we decided to call it aubergine.
Well, you know, I'm not saying that
I
I
loved it. It was
dislike that I don't like it. It's more of a strange feeling, like sort of this, I can't think of the word for it, but
It's like someone wearing your clothing almost? Or?
yeah, it feels strange.
Really?
I also feel complimented, don't get me wrong, especially if
yeah.
it's someone like really fashionable and trendy and they chose the same shirt that I chose, like, wow, that's nice. But there's still something odd about it. It's just something, it's even like a subconscious feeling, like it just feels weird. I don't even necessarily think about it consciously, it's just like this
You don't have
jolt
a
inside of
sister.
me.
You see, you don't
I
have
don't.
a sister.
I don't.
That makes a difference. If your sister wears, you wear, it's a different
Yeah, that's true.
being there.
But the point is, and you know, with a sister, you have more of that identity. You share that identity, so maybe it's not as awkward. You know, the point is we really begin to identify with that image that our clothing creates. They become us. There's a Jewish joke told of a Jewish traveler. He's on his way, peddling something, most probably, and it's nearing nightfall, so he needs to stop for the night, and he sees an inn. He goes in, and unfortunately, the innkeeper tells him the inn is very, very full tonight. So the traveler is devastated because what else is he supposed to do? He's in the middle of nowhere. He's not going to travel at night. It's dangerous. So he begs the innkeeper, please, I don't care where you put me to sleep. I just need somewhere to spend the night. So the innkeeper says, you know what? On the top floor, like in the attic, I have this big Kazakh sleeping there. If you're really desperate, you can go share a room with him. So the Jew's pretty desperate.
Oh, gosh.
And he decides he'll take him up on the offer. But before he goes up, he tells the innkeeper, says, listen, I need to catch a very early train tomorrow morning. I can't miss it. Please, I beg you, wake me up before dawn because I must make my train. Okay, fine. And he goes up to the attic. The Kazakh's fast asleep, snoring, makes himself comfortable, and he goes to sleep. Sure enough, shortly before dawn, there's a pounding on the door. It's the innkeeper saying, you wanted me to wake you up, so here's your wake-up call. It's time to get up for your train. So he quickly gets up. It's dark in the room, no electricity. It's before dawn. He grabs some clothes that he figures are his, puts them on, and he runs out to make his train. As he reaches the train station, and as he's making his way towards his platform, he passes a window, I guess a darkened window. He sees his reflection. And what does he see staring out at him? A Cossack.
Oh my God.
He says, oh, that innkeeper. He woke up the Cossack instead of me. I better go wake up that poor Jew now. And he runs back to the inn. So whereas,
What's the name of the village where there are idiots?
Film. So whereas, of course, the story has the element of absurdity to it, nonetheless, we can always find a kernel of truth. And it's not a joke that we tend to identify with the clothing we put on. On the other hand, the other conclusion we came to, or you ladies came to, is that not only is our clothing projecting a certain image to other people, but our clothing, the clothing that we choose, can also send an important message to us. Independent, unconnected to anyone else. Even in our own home when we're not going to see other people, our clothing can send a message to us. Turn in your book, please, to text 1. Anyone would like to share the page number with us?
Which page?
That's my book has different page numbers, so it's 154.
Text 1.
Text 1. Would anyone like to read it?
Is it a study this year, 2014, from Northwestern University, examined a concept called enclothed cognition. Researchers define it in their report as the symptomatic influence that clothes have on the wearer's psychological processes. meaning what your clothes are saying to you, not about you and how they make you feel. The researchers distributed standard white lab coats to participants, telling some that it was a doctor's coat and some that it was a painter's smock. All participants performed the same task, but those wearing the doctor's coat were more careful and attentive. Enclosed cognition gives scientific proof to the idea that you should dress not how you feel, but how you want to feel. The clothes you choose are sending a message to those around you, but also to you yourself.
Isn't that interesting? So we spoke about what your clothes say about you, but your clothes are also saying something to you. Our clothes can empower us. So, Renia, I love the statement you said before, dress how you would like to be addressed. That's concerning the first thing we said about clothing, that when we're dressing, keeping in mind how other people are going to view us, the image we're going to project. We're dressing how we want to be addressed, how we want other people to look at us. Here, we're talking about something slightly different. Dress not how you feel, but how you want to feel. In other words, dress how you would like to be. Dress to be the kind of person that you want to be. Never mind what other people are going to think of you. Who do you want to be? What's the identity? What's the personality? What's the behavior that you want from yourself? And dress accordingly. And this is what you were saying about clothing enhancing your mood. That even if you're not going to see anyone, you put on clothing because you would like to feel a certain way. And it's not only about feeling, it's also about behavior. As we see this example here, the white coats. It actually impacted their behavior. The ones who felt like doctors, that they were dressed like doctors, they took themselves very seriously. And the ones who believed that they were dressed like painters and felt like painters, they took themselves a little less seriously. So what we wear also empowers us to behave in a certain way.
Do you remember the Shabbaton where we went roller skating or ice skating or something, and I was sitting with the coats, and a woman came up to me and she had the most magnificent waist-length red hair, and I complimented her on it, and she said, well, I want to know, are these all your daughters? And I said, no, they're just girls. They're part of our community. And she said, they are gorgeous. And do you remember this?
No, I don't.
It was something like 10 or more of the girls from Vancouver, from Chabad. And when I looked at them, I went, they are. They were modestly dressed, they were happy as could be, and all of the other girls in the whole arena were dressed like prostitutes. It was horrible. And it was day for night. And she'd seen this, and she wanted to know where we were from, and tell their mothers. So I did, yeah.
Nice. That's nice to hear all these years later. I didn't know that.
You did. I did tell all your mothers.
Oh, good.
If you were there or not.
Okay, so going back to our original question, so far we have a couple of answers. Why do we wear clothes, practicality aside? Well, so far we've established we wear clothes because of a certain image we want to project to others, because of an identity we want to form. And number two, we wear clothes in order to empower us, in order to become a certain person that we would like to be, more in terms of our behavior. The first touches more on identity, and the second touches more on behavior. Our clothing impacts how we begin to behave, the kind of person we begin to become. Now let's answer this question from the perspective of Judaism. What does Judaism say about the purpose of clothing? So it's very interesting that we are just coming from the Shabbat where we read the Torah portion of Tetzaveh. And me and Ora were discussing this before the class. It's so interesting that very often our class is very connected in a very clear way to the Torah portion that we just read. And in the Torah portion of Tetzaveh is one very strong, clear reference to clothing in the Torah. And what am I referring to? The clothing of the high priest. And not only does the Torah portion mention the clothing of the high priest, but it goes into all the details and how each item of clothing is made and how it needs to look. And of course, they were very beautiful, dignified clothing. Turn to text 3a in your book. And here we have an excerpt from the Torah portion that talks about the command to create these clothing. Anyone from this side of the table want to read? Okay, Rivka, thank you.
Where's 3A?
What page do you have, ladies, for that?
Is it the priestly
159.
garment?
Mm-hmm.
And you, Moses, bring near to me your brother Aaron and his sons with him from amongst the children of Israel to minister to me. And you shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother, for honor and for beauty. And these are the garments they shall make: a breastplate, an apron, a cloak, a checked robe, a turban, and a belt. They shall make the apron of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet wool, and fine spun linen, artistic work.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the psukim continue to describe how these clothes should be made. This is God speaking to Moshe, to Moses, instructing him with regards to the clothing that he should make for his brother Aaron and Aaron's sons, who are the priests. Aaron's the high priest, his sons are the other priests serving in the Mishkan and the tabernacle. And of course, this continues to apply in the the two holy temples we had so far in Jerusalem, and God willing, very soon when Mashiach comes. So if you look at the way the Torah refers to these clothing, they need to be made for honor and for beauty.
For honor and beauty.
That is the function of those clothes, for honor and for beauty. Isn't that interesting? You know, the priests, through their service in the temple, they represented the entire Jewish nation. That was a very honorable job. And their clothing needed to reflect that, needed to reflect the dignity and the honor of the type of job they had, the fact that they had this responsibility to represent the whole Jewish people in their service of God. But not only were they for honor, they were also for beauty. Because as part of their job, what they were essentially doing was facilitating God coming into the lives of the Jewish people, which creates a beautiful life, a meaningful life, as we spoke about in the very first class of this series, of what real beauty is. It's the harmony, it's the meaning, it's the purpose, the truth in life, which is having God in life. And so because the priests facilitated that for the Jewish people, they were creating beauty, and their clothes had to reflect that. So their clothes reflected the honor of the position as well as the beauty of the position. And in fact, they were not allowed to serve without every single one of the garments that were required of them to wear. They were integral to their job. Mm-hmm.
Just
I'm sure.
gorgeous.
I'm sure. So what does this have to do with us? Take a look, please, at
Our
text.
relationship with Hashem.
And what about our clothing?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's develop this further. Okay? Take a look, please, at text 5a. Take a look to yourselves. What does it say there?
You shall be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Mm-hmm. Now, who is this said about? Who should be a kingdom of priests?
Jewish people.
The Jewish people. So, in a sense, we may not have actually served as priests in a literal level, but in a certain sense, we are also called priests. As you said correctly, Rivka, because we're all busy with the service of God. That's our mission. That's why we're created. That's why we're put here in this world. To be more specific, what exactly is our service as a kingdom of priests? Text 5b, a very famous quote from Isaiah. What are we meant to be?
I have given you a covenant of a people as a light unto the nations.
A light unto the
There was
nations.
that light that we
So not only are we supposed to be busy in our own personal lives serving God, but we also are meant to be a role model for the entire world, not just for the Jewish people, but for the entire world of how to serve God, how to be good people, how to be ethical people, how to be the kind of people that God meant us to be when He created us. And just as the clothing of the high priests reflected the honor and dignity of his position of bringing godliness into the world and allowing all the Jewish people to bring godliness into their own lives, so too, when we fulfill our similar mission of serving God and facilitating the people of the entire world to bring God into their lives, our clothing should also reflect the dignity the honor, the holiness, the beauty of this mission. And as we mentioned before, clothing has this amazing ability to project our identity to other people. And we spoke about this from many angles, right? We decide how we want to appear to all kinds of people. And we use clothing to express all kinds of aspects of our personality, all kinds of aspects of our identity. Well, you know what? We could also use our clothing to express the most foundational aspect of our identity, our Jewish identity, and our Jewish mission. Now, how does this work? Is there some kind of Jewish uniform, such as, the uniform the high priest had in the temple? Well, not really. Not really. But there's no question that throughout Jewish history, there always was a distinct Jewish dress, whatever it was. But the Jews always had a distinct dress, going way back in time, even before we were a nation, to the Jews in Egypt. Anyone familiar with that? That concept, that one of the reasons why the Jews merited to leave Egypt was why, Natalia?
Because they lived as Jews. They practiced modesty or whatever. They dressed as Jews. Yeah, the language was another, exactly. But for the purposes of our class, one of the three things, and they were living in a very depraved society. Egypt was the most depraved society of the time, and in many senses, the Jews might have assimilated in certain ways. But there were three things they never assimilated in: their Jewish names, their Jewish language, and their distinct Jewish dress, their Jewish clothing. Now, whatever that Jewish dress is at any given point in history, there's always something in common, and I think Rivka just mentioned it. And that is a term known as tzniut. What is tzniut? A dignified, not a loud, ostentatious mode of dress. It's dignified, it's elegant, it's when we say modest, it's hard, it has so many connotations, but tasteful. It's tasteful.
Page 164.
In fact, take a look at text 6. Thank you, Rivka. You're on top of the game here. On page 164, we have an excerpt from the Rambam, from Maimonides. Now, we mentioned this quite a few times over the different classes. Maimonides compiled a set of books that go through the entire Torah, that go through our entire life and the way God wants us to live every aspect of our lives. So he also touches on the way a Jewish person should dress, men and women. So take a quick look at it. What are some of the things Maimonides says about the way a Jew should dress, no matter the style, because the styles of Jewish dress have always been different and have fluctuated and changed. In fact, the dress that we tend to associate now is very Jewish, the black coats and the black hat, that's only a few hundred years old. So in the grand scheme of our history, it's not that ancient. But what the Rambam describes here, or Maimonides describes here, is the common denominator in any Jewish dress throughout the ages. So what are some of the things that he says?
I think it's interesting, this really impressed me. His clothes should not drag on the ground as the clothes of the arrogant, but rather they should extend to his ankles, and his sleeves should reach his fingertips. He should not let down his outer garment, because this appears arrogant, except on Sabbath, if he has no other change of clothes. I found that.
That is interesting. Let me provide a bit of background so we understand that in the right context. It was common in those times, the times of the Rambam, that the elite society would wear very, very long robes because they were just able to sit around at leisure all day. But people who had to work for a living, those type of long, long robes were completely impractical. So the Rambam's saying that someone who's not of the nobility and wears one of those types of garments, it comes across as arrogant or as haughty because he's trying to make himself look greater than, he's showing off. For Shabbat, he says it's okay because Shabbat we dress differently. We're not working like we are the rest of the week, and we dress, it's a special day, we want to honor the special day, so we wear something that shows of a higher status, of a higher stature. But someone who dresses like that during the week, it's not considered tasteful. It's a form of showing off.
So that's where the arrogance comes.
Yeah, that's the background to it, okay? And he says other things, they should be clean,
Yes.
should
hearing
be
that.
moderate, should be nice, but not drawing people's attention too much. So that's how Jewish clothing always was throughout the ages. It was a symbol of what we were put here to do, to serve God and be a light unto the nations of how they should serve God as well. So, why do we wear clothing? Now we have another element here. We added something else. Also to express identity, but with a different twist. Our clothing has the ability to express our Jewish identity to others. And perhaps we can say also that our coming at our clothing from a Jewish perspective also is not just sending a message to the world, but is also sending a message to us, to the wearers, because how true is it that when you look a certain way, you feel like you have to behave in a consistent way with how you look? So perhaps if we wear Jewish clothing, it might cause us to be more aware of acting in a Jewish way, of Jewish behavior, of representing God to the world. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I mentioned once when I was in the elevator and one of the ladies said to me, "Are you a former nun?" And one of the things
that's an interesting question to be asked.
she asked me that, and then I looked at her and, "Why would you say that?" And there's all these people in the elevator, and then she says, "Well, you know, you're modest and you're very kind and all that." I said, "Well, that's what we Jews are." I mean, but but she didn't know Jews. She just knew rich Jews in the States. So
well, that's exactly our job, to model that kind of behavior and to...
Exactly. So, yeah, I remember someone once when I was about 20 said I should wear a lower cut dress. And actually, a friend actually bought me a dress. You know, come on, get out of your shell. And so, of course, I took a shawl with me, and all evening I was covered up. So they all gave up on me and said, dress the way you might dress.
That's the best
but
way.
It couldn't be, yeah.
Leon always wears three-piece suit and the hat, and sometimes when we're going, people ask, "Are you going to a party or are you going cocktail or something?" And that's his everyday
Dignified. Yeah. There you go.
But it's ingrained in us, isn't it? It's not going to change. Like, we are Jewish, and if we really...
Well, we can't really generalize because there's all types of Jews in the world. But if we really want to be true to our Jewish soul, this is part of it. To express our, we're here to express our Jewish identity. So we may do that in many different ways, but why not through our clothing as well, as the high priest did? Because clothing is an important way to express identity. I mean, identity can be expressed in many, many ways. Identity could be expressed through what you say and through what you do, but clothing is an important way as well. So just something to keep in mind, to take into consideration when we're thinking about expressing our Jewish identity. Clothing could factor into that. Okay, so any questions so far? Everything clear? Did we answer the question, Nora? Why we wear clothes?
I'm just really being facetious.
No, I want to make sure we went back to answer it.
No, I mean
Yeah?
in the context, yes.
Okay.
Yes, no, I'm really being facetious because if I had my way, I wouldn't wear them. I'm being serious.
You really don't like wearing clothes?
No, I actually always say I wear clothes for other people because other people would be embarrassed.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay too.
But so if
That's
if
also
I
an
had
expression
my
of
brothers,
yourself.
I would not wear clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So when you said why do we wear clothes, I said great question.
But those are good reasons too. The reasons you just said are excellent reasons. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're a little different than other people's reasons, but they're good reasons, right?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean...
It's a relationship with clothes, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you
I
have
think
such
it's
a
more.
relationship
I think it's more a relationship with your body. So I mean that's maybe a whole other topic.
maybe.
But I still look a lot of this as somehow your relationship.
This
with your
really
body.
could bring us into a very interesting topic, which I was debating whether we should bring it in, and that's how we even came to be wearing clothing in the first place, going way back to Adam and Eve.
Well, I would imagine
But that's a huge topic, so I decided just to try and keep it a little bit more streamlined because it's impossible to really cover everything well
I think that's it.
No, the reason
but-
I'm saying
but you
facetious
know,
is say,
I'm-
why do you wear clothes? So a lot of this are reasons for why we do. And of course, I'm sitting here going, well,
They don't
why-
apply to you.
Why do we, like altogether? But that's, so I'm just being
You know,
silly a little
in a
the
sense,
context.
I'm beginning to regret perhaps that I didn't bring in the whole thing of Adam and Eve, because I think that would really answer your question.
Maybe.
If you'd like, after the class, we can go over that a little bit, because
Okay, great.
to understand theoretically why we wear clothes in a general, more global sense, if you want, why we wear clothes, we really do have to go back to Adam and Eve and the way the world changed after they
Totally.
did what they
It
did.
is,
So
because-
perhaps after the class we could discuss
Yes,
that further.
Yes, yes.
Okay?
And I guess they bring that up about the priest too, where he, although he was wearing long clothes, they had some form of undershorts. And that's, I forget now what that's about, but it's not only just.
It was also functional. It was a mix of functional and symbolic and beautiful.
So
And
he wasn't aware of himself, that he was more of others rather than was obsessed with himself, I think, or something. Isn't that something to that effect?
yeah, he was aware that his position was all about what he's going to do for the Jewish people.
He would be more very
His clothes
aware
were a
of his
reminder of
role,
that.
mindful. That was the purpose of the shorts was not to protect or to not be exposed, but more
Well,
to be aware.
I would say both.
Of his,
You know,
yeah.
there's overlap. Not so, black and
Yeah.
white, but it's all different reasons,
Yeah.
all different functions.
I
Okay,
guess
so,
that's
so
what
let
I'm
me
interested
just throw this in, because now that you're saying that, it's stimulating something else for me. Because it even says here, when they're clothed in the priestly garments, their priesthood is upon them. But when they're not wearing the garments, the priesthood is not upon them. So I would read that and say, when you put on a certain garment, you play a certain role. But in the same vein, when they were not in that role, they did not wear these clothes. And that could possibly be humility too. That, there are times you're asked to be in this role, but there's also times that it's not appropriate or you're not asked to be in this
I
role.
love that. I love that. That's beautiful.
So that's what I read there. I mean, isn't this interesting? Like we were talking, you put something on and you feel a certain way, or you take on a certain task or role, but maybe that's not all of who you are, or maybe you don't always wear those, or you don't wear them simplistically, or anyway, just interesting.
Very nice point. Well
Malky,
said.
I've always thought of men and women as Jewish men and women. Jewish men have a public role, and Jewish women have a private role in life. And I'm not sure how that's expressed in clothes.
That's an excellent question,
And
of
can
course.
you just
It's all connected.
clarify it for me?
That's a huge topic as well.
Yes, it is.
So maybe we'll save it for a different class.
Okay,
It's an excellent question. And yes, there's definitely a connection.
okay.
And I hope that one day we'll have a chance to really go into that, because it's really a beautiful
I'd like
idea.
to, please.
Can you just say, why would you say private as opposed to inner? Because women are so communal.
I like the word inner.
Because
Yes,
private
that's a
to
good
me would
word.
be one on their own. But Jewish
No,
women
no,
are
no,
so
no, no, no,
communal.
no,
You
no.
mean they're not out in the world, they're in their homes, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, but they're still very.
Men are in the
communal.
synagogue, they're in the public eye.
In business.
Women are in the home. They bring guests into their home, but they have a private role with children and the husbands that isn't seen by the public or by non-Jews.
Okay, like I said, this is really a
Well, that's
huge, huge topic.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll get to it. That would be nice.
Very interesting.
Barbara, did you want to say something? And then we'll go on to the next part of the class.
To the priestly stuff, and the garments of the priests.
Yeah.
Because to me, when they were wearing the robes of the high priest, and everything having to be a certain way, the priests were channels in my feeling, were channels for the divine to bring it into the tabernacle and to facilitate that for others, to have that experience. So it's like putting on another part of your spaceship. You're
However,
Like
the
if you were going into
holiest work they did was done in white linen, period.
the color of, yeah. But all of it, I think underneath did they wear something underneath all that? Like that's on top? It's sort of like.
Yeah, the underwear.
Depends which garment. That was part of their garment, though.
Part of
The
their
8
garment.
garments
So
that they were
they're
required
white
to wear
linen
included
with
pants
underneath?
underneath and a little like a shift shirt
Okay,
underneath.
I'm just guessing because I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I would think it would be underneath because I'm guessing my feeling about it, and then on top of
But
it,
the
they
priestly
would wear
robes
these other
were
things.
put aside
Yes.
for certain roles, and only the
Yes.
white linen was worn to do certain things, which were like to go into the Holy of Holies.
Right, when they were alone, correct?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. It was just the high priest
And
alone.
I don't know this, but I
But
know
also,
this.
when they went,
I have
when they
not
took,
learned this, but
but
I feel
also
I
when
know
they took
this.
the
well.
ashes from the menorah out to the public dump, to the where they dumped those ashes, where they took
See, I
the
have-
rubbish from the sacrifices out, they
Yeah.
wore only white,
Mhm.
and that wasn't private. That was very public.
Mhm.
Well,
Well,
isn't that where
I'm
Yom
just
Kippur
saying,
white
I'm
comes
just
from?
saying what this
Could be.
feeling
Could be
is
it's
for
connected.
me, because I've had a major connection with the breastplate of the high priest, and I have yet to create an art, like to do art in that, because I feel that each one was so specific that it's like it has to be exact, because it's a vortex. Each one to me is a gateway for
Okay.
something.
So
And
in
so that's
white,
why I'm saying
his humility is foremost in the sight of God, and in the priestly garments, the beauty and
I'm not denying anything.
Well, it goes back, to what Ora was saying, that the clothes were not about wasn't about the priest on a personal level. It wasn't about how special he is because he was chosen for the job. It was just about facilitating this bringing down of godliness and holiness into the world. That's really what they were about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on from physical clothes. We're now going to discuss clothing in a slightly different dimension. You may be familiar with the concept, and I'm pretty sure most of you ladies are, that everything that we see as a physical object is actually an embodiment of a spiritual creation or a spiritual concept. The physical that we see all around us is just a mirror of the spiritual. Everything starts off spiritual and then evolves into something physical. That's the way God created the world. But everything has a spiritual source and a spiritual beginning, a spiritual counterpart.
Physical mirrors,
So-
internal.
Yeah. Spiritual. So now that we've really dissected the need for physical clothing, let's turn this over to understanding what spiritual clothing are, the spiritual counterpart to our clothing, what they are and why we need them, and what exactly the parallel is between them. Okay? So, what are spiritual clothes?
Words
Okay,
and
let's go
actions.
back. Good, excellent. We all have a soul, a Jewish soul. Okay, that soul is where our personality comes from, where our identity comes from. Our soul contains our intellectual capacity, our emotional capacity. What makes us, what creates our emotional makeup, what creates our intellectual makeup. That's all what our soul's about. It's the foundation of our personality, the building blocks of our personality, of who we are. That is the soul itself. Then we see that the soul has garments. What are the soul's garments? As Natalia said, thought, speech, and action. So we have the soul itself, which is our personality, our identity. And then we have the soul's garments, thought, speech, and action. Now, tell me please, how are thought, speech, and action, behavior, how are those garments? What does that have to do with garments? Why do we call those garments?
because they're fitted to us with the same intents that we have in putting clothes on to our physical bodies. We want to feel comfortable within, but also be able to do the things that we want to do in the right way and have the right effect on the people around us.
Okay, good. Let's develop that. Okay? I'm going to draw a parallel between our clothing and our soul's clothing in two ways. Okay? Number one, we spoke about clothes as this means of projecting a certain image to other people, expressing our identity. Okay? That is exactly what our thought, speech, and action does. Primarily, we're going to focus this on the speech and the action, because thought, well, I'll explain soon why, but you'll see we're going to be talking mostly about speech and action. Speech and action does exactly that. It projects our identity, it communicates our identity, it communicates our personality to the outside world. My soul is inside of me. My thoughts, my feelings, what makes me me, that's my inner world. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Only I am aware of that. How can somebody else be made aware of that? If I speak of it. Through what I say to people. Through my behavior. Through what I do. Through how I act. Then all of a sudden people could see what type of person I am. Am I nice? Am I stingy? Am I honest? Am I kind? Am I selfish? People could see that through the way I speak and the way I act. So those are garments. Those are the means through which we express our identity or our personality to other people, just like our physical clothing does. Now the reason why I excluded thought, although thought is a garment, thought is a garment in the sense that it expresses our subconscious thoughts into conscious thought. But
Sort of like underwear.
That's right.
Sort of.
okay, good metaphor. So yes, so in a sense it is expressing personality, but within me still. Okay, so that's why I'm putting it off to the side. But speech and behavior shows who I am to other people. Okay? It's the image we project. And we could project whatever image we want to other people, right? Just like our clothes. We choose our clothes depending on what image we want to project. We could choose our speech, we could choose our words, we could choose our actions depending on what image we want to project. I'll take comments in one moment, okay? That's the first parallel between physical clothing and our spiritual garments. Is that clear so far? Okay. Second parallel. We mentioned about physical clothing that although we could take them on and off very easily, they're totally interchangeable, nonetheless, they are connected to our identity. But notice I said they're connected to our identity. They are not our identity, meaning they can be changed. Our personality is very hard to change. The character that we're born with, that's embedded deep in our soul, it's very hard to change. It could be done, but it could take more than a lifetime to do. And it's a whole process, right? Step by step by step. But our clothes, meaning our words, our behaviors, we can change them easily. I could speak one way today, one way tomorrow. I could be in a nasty mood. I could still be a decent person. I could be stingy by nature. That doesn't change, but I could still write a check out to charity. My behavior. I could change my behavior, even though inside I'm still the same person. I could be really, really angry, and I could speak calmly. Did I become calm? No. But my words could be calm. So just like clothing, our spiritual clothing, our speech and our action, thoughts too, by the way, our conscious thought, we could switch them. We could change them pretty easily. We have a choice. What we want to say, what we don't want to say. We have a choice of how we want to behave and how we don't want to behave. We might not have a choice of how we were born, what our personality is, what our nature is, but we do have a choice in how we project that and how we implement that. Which means that just as physical clothing, our spiritual clothing could help us become the person that we want to be. Because when we choose nicer words, more appropriate words, when we choose actions that are fitting the kind of person we wish we could be, we could become that person. Just like our clothes can empower us to become a certain person. Take a look at text 8b. This is very, very powerful.
Oh, yeah.
This is a quote from the Tanya. It's the ABCs of how our soul works, and that's where we find a lot of information about our soul garments, our soul and its garments.
This picture.
And this is what the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, has to say about the garments. Listen to this. Now, these 3 garments, when they embody the thought, speech, and action of the Torah and its mitzvot, although they are called garments of the soul, nevertheless, they are infinitely greater than the soul itself. How empowering is that? What does this mean? What did we just read? You know, we could be stuck at a certain place in our life. That happens. This is who I am right now. Now, if we were limited to that place where we find ourselves now, that means we're limiting our impact on the world. We're limiting the kind of interaction we could have with other people. So going back to our examples, if I'm in a nasty mood right now, I'm in a bad mood. Well, that's the place I'm in right now. What do you want from me? I should all of a sudden feel happy? I'm not happy. I'm in a nasty mood. Now, if I limit myself to that place where I find myself right now, then I'm not going to be able to have very nice interactions with other people. I may not be able to leave the house and go to work and function properly and do all the things I need to do to provide for myself, to provide for my family, or whatever it is. I'm in a nasty mood. But here is where the garments kick in. These garments, they can allow us to become greater than we are on our own. Because even though me, myself, and I'm in this place now and I can't get out of it, if I just change my garments, it's not changing me, but it's changing my garments, I could reach a better place. I could still impact people in a positive way, interact with people nicely, go about my day, function the way I want to be. Inside, I still feel like I'm in a nasty mood. Okay, that's fine. But my behavior doesn't have to reflect that. So when we make good choices for our garments, when we choose our garments wisely, when we speak words of Torah, and our actions reflect what God wants us to do, reflects our mission that we are put here to do, we can reach places way beyond of where we find ourselves naturally. Now, eventually, our behavior might actually change who we are inside. And that is a wonderful goal to work towards. But that doesn't happen right away. And some changes take a lifetime to implement. But at least our behavior can change. Our words can change. And in that sense, we could have a tremendous impact on the world, no matter what kind of place we find ourselves in. So really, when it comes to doing good things and making a difference in the world, who we are, our personality, it's kind of irrelevant. What really matters is our behavior. It's action. It's what we do and what we say.
Like those girls beautifully dressed at the skating rink.
Yep, that's a good example.
What impact they actually have.
You never know. And who knows what those girls were thinking inside. Maybe there was a girl there who inside was thinking, I hate dressing this way. It's so hard to skate in a skirt.
Like her.
Yeah, I wish I could wear pants to skate. Maybe. But nonetheless,
they behaved and dressed as they did.
they put on that, well, here we have on both levels, the garment. And like you say, who knows what kind of impact it could have had. And it's like that with everything. When you just do the behavior, that behavior might impact someone in such a strong way, you don't even know what kind of ripple effect that behavior has. And meanwhile, inside you were so far from it. And if you allowed that behavior, if you were stuck on behavior only reflecting how I feel right now, you never would have had that impact on the world. Can you imagine?
It's interesting that as I've kept kosher and have refused to put anything in my mouth that isn't, I've had an impact on Jews. They've told me I've had an impact, that it's made them start looking at things. As I use my Hebrew name, other women started using their Hebrew names. It's really interesting, and they would tell me about it.
It's really amazing, because you never know. And if we wait for our moods and our feelings and our ideas to catch up with the kind of impact we can make, how much would we lose out? And, I'll call it hypocrisy. Yes, maybe it's hypocrisy in a sense because our actions, we have this dissonance, right, between what we feel and what we think and what we do. But imagine if everyone in the world was a moral hypocrite in a good way,
Exactly.
was acting nicer than they really are, was kinder than they really are, was more giving and selfless than they really are. I mean, come on, what kind of world would we have? So this kind of hypocrisy, we could deal with it. We'll take it. And in fact, to illustrate this point, I'd like to share a beautiful story with you. Take a look at text 9. We're going to read the story inside.
Yes, it's a good story.
Was it Minnesota?
Yeah. Anyone familiar with the story?
I read it somewhere in
You
the
read it somewhere?
before.
Someone who does read it. It's a good story.
Okay, if you're familiar with it, maybe we won't read it inside, but I'll tell it over.
That's so Rebbe, no?
Yeah. There's a school in Minnesota for women who want to learn more about Judaism to further their Jewish education. It's directed by an amazing rabbi named Rabbi Manis Friedman. You may have heard of him.
Spent 2 weeks there and it was
Oh, yeah?
phenomenal.
That's what I've heard. I've never been there personally, but I've heard amazing, amazing things about it. So anyways, this story focuses on a young woman who was there in that school. So it's a true story. And she really wanted to get married, but she had some issues. She was not a very kind person. She was very self-centered, and she really couldn't break out of it. And as a result, she didn't have too many friends, and she really couldn't find someone to marry because she was difficult. She had a difficult personality. And she was seeing all kinds of therapists and psychologists, and each one's diagnosing her the same way. Yes, you're a classic narcissist, and you're self-centered, and you need to break out of it, and et cetera, et cetera. But no matter what kind of therapy she was going through, she just couldn't break out of this cycle that she was in, break out of her issues. So Rabbi Friedman suggested that perhaps she should write a letter to the Rebbe and go visit the Rebbe and give him the letter describing her issues, and perhaps the Rebbe could advise her, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So that's what she did. She wrote a letter, pages and pages, describing her whole history and her issues and all the treatments she's had and how it's not working. And she gave it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe he was known to be a speed reader. So he looked at it and, the pages and pages in 2 minutes. He looks up at her and says, "So, what's the problem?" So she said, "What do you mean?" So the Rebbe says, "I don't understand what your problem is." She said, "Well, it says there, you see my history on the pages." The Rebbe says, no, I read the pages. I understand your history. But I don't see what the problem is. So again, she begins to explain her whole history and her issues. And I said, "No, now, what's the problem now?" She said, "Well, I'm self-centered. I'm egotistic. I'm not nice to people. I don't think about others." So the Rebbe says, "Well, start thinking about others then.
That's it.
Go back to your school. And when it's lunchtime, look around at the other ladies at your table and see if anyone needs anything. And go bring people if they want this food, that food, a cup, a fork, a napkin. Go bring it to them. You think you're selfish? You think you're self-centered? So don't be. Do something nice for someone else. Try it." So she said, the Rebbe says, "Who said you have to be a kind person to do kind things? So you're not a kind person. So what? You could still be kind. You could still do kind things." So she went back, and it's exactly what she did. It's a true story. The next time they had lunch together in the school, she looked around at her table. She looked to see who needed things, and she helped people. She brought people what they needed, and she slowly got into that habit. And of course, the end of the story is she changed. She was able to get married, and today she has a beautiful family. So who says you have to be kind to be kind? Eventually, start to act kind, and eventually you might just get there.
You need someone like the Rebbe to do this, to get the turnaround.
The Rebbe just reminded her of that, but we could all do it. The Rebbe doesn't do things for us. He just points us in the right direction. He empowers us to go in the
He asked her, "What's the
And
problem?"
people
Right.
like Malki and Rabbi Beaton do the same thing.
I agree.
No.
They ask the right questions.
Yeah, if you want the
Point
right
at the-
answer,
Let me tell you another story.
if you want the right answers, you have to ask the right questions.
Let me tell you another story. We mentioned the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He wrote the Tanya. We just read that excerpt from. He was once staying in an inn. It was owned by a wealthy Jew who was known all over for the charity that he would give, and he was an amazing benefactor to all kinds of poor people who come stay in his inn. He would feed them and host them and everything. So the Alter Rebbe was staying in his inn at one point, and this Jew, the owner of the inn, he realized that the Alter Rebbe was a special person, not an ordinary guest. So he went over to him. Something was troubling him. He wanted to ask him for some advice, and he says, Rebbe, I just don't feel right. He says, everyone looks at me as this kind, generous man, and I know I really help a lot of people and I do so much for people, but I don't do it with a full heart. I do it because I like how I feel when I help people, but I don't really care about the people. I feel like a hypocrite. Should I just stop? So the Alter Rebbe looked at him and says, you may be insincere in your giving, but believe me, the people you give to, their stomachs are sincerely filled.
That's right.
So again, it doesn't depend on our personality to make a difference. It really, bottom line, depends on our behavior. And that's what clothing is really all about. Whether it's physical clothing or spiritual clothing, exact same principle. And on one hand, our clothing sends a message to ourselves. It is a choice of who we want to be and how we want to be, and along the same lines of how we want other people to see us and how we want other people to perceive us, both in a general sense and in a Jewish sense, as we spoke about our Jewish identity, and on a soul level as well. When we choose clothing, speech, behaviors that allow us to become the person we want to be, we can then project that image to other people and impact people in a much stronger way based on the actions that we choose, the speech, the language that we choose. So, what can we conclude from this class on clothing? That when we choose our clothing wisely, it will enhance us in more ways than one. As we started off the class with the workshop, choosing our clothing wisely will enhance us physically, it will enhance our look. But more than that, when we choose our clothing wisely, both our physical clothing and our spiritual clothing, it will enhance our behavior, it will enhance the person that we will become, and hopefully, eventually, it'll enhance even our identity, even the person that we truly become in all aspects, both behavior and inside ourselves and our inner worlds.
You're so right.
And for this one, it is better natural light. So if you can't quite tell, don't worry.
I can't. I just feel better with this.
Yeah, me with this one.
Generally, the colors that you really like and that you're attracted to very often are the ones that look good on you. Not always, but often you could trust your intuition and things like colors that you're over and over again attracted to.
Exactly, because you said to see which one that your hand sort of blends with, and one that it just sits there. So, okay.
Gold? Okay, so far you're consistent with the foundation, with the gold, okay?
This one is actually cold.
The silver is cool, yes.
Silver is cool and gold is warm.
Gold is warm.
Yeah, I can feel a temperature difference too.
But this is cold.
Silver.
This one,
So you're also pretty consistent.
good side.
What about you?
You wiped it off. It's good now.
Go.
I can tell already between your glasses and your scarf. You know what you are.
Should I go?
Sometimes when people have
I
makeup
wear
that's wrong for them,
wooden
that's why they look
shoes to the
tardy.
went very fast
So
to
that's what that is.
dress them to find
I
them.
don't know.
So that you have to something has to match.
It's perfect. You always look great. Okay, let's go on to the last
Are you
test.
actually wearing makeup now?
I am.
Yes, she
Are you
is.
wearing foundation and everything?
You can tell.
Yeah.
I
But see,
couldn't
it's
tell.
natural.
It's better if you can't tell, right? That's how, I guess, that's what they say. Supposed to look natural. Just supposed to enhance your features. It's not supposed to look like you painted yourself.
Yeah, you're not supposed to look basic,
Hair,
you're
you
supposed
can,
to.
you can change. So,
Right, so you have to go according to your natural color.
but actually the natural look that's like in some, also with curly and some people, curly they make straight,
Right.
and they don't really look.
It's true. It's true. The way Hashem made us, I guess, is the way we look best, right?
Yeah, the way we were created.
The way we were created. Okay, so the third test for skin tone. Take a look at your inner wrist, the veins there. Again, easier in natural light, but I'll give it a try. If your veins look more bluish, you have cool tones. If your veins look more greenish, then you have warm tones.
Oh, how do I tell?
Blue veins is cool. Reason we need to take a good look at our skin undertone. And there are 3 ways we can do it. And the more ways you do this test to figure out your undertone, the more of a sense you will have of what your undertone is. Some of the tests work much better in natural light, but we'll have to work with what we have for tonight. So if you notice, there's various tools here out on the table. There are plates with foundation. There are silver and gold color papers. And there are mirrors. Now the mirror you're pretty much just going to need for the foundation test. The third test, you don't actually need anything to do the test. You simply need to look at your own veins. So let's begin with the foundation test. Now, ladies, feel comfortable. If it's not something you feel comfortable doing, that's fine. As I said, you don't need to do all 3 tests even to determine your undertone. It's totally how you feel. Now, taking a look at the foundation, do you notice a difference between the 2 blobs there? What would you say the difference is?
I would say one is like beigeier and one maybe more reddy, like
One's warm and one's cool.
Well, that's true. Yes, one is warm, one's cool. And what would you say in terms of the color of them? What's the difference between the warm one and the cool one?
More yellow, the warm with the yellow.
Okay, one is more of a yellow tone, and one is more of a red or a pink tone.
This is very interesting because you're talking warm and cold. Are you guys thinking that the warm is the beigeier one?
So that's what I was just going to ask you. Can anyone tell which is which?
I would have thought the reddier one was warmer.
No, yellow tone is a warm tone, and pink is cool.
Really?
Okay, and could you all tell, I mean, which is which? Which is the yellower one and which is the pinker one? That's pretty self-understood. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take a dab, and this is where the mirrors come in, and we'll have to share the mirrors. I don't have enough, unfortunately. Put a dab of the warm tone foundation on your cheek, and put a dab of the pink tone on your cheek. And rub them both that you're actually going to use because it looks good. Because I could speak from experience. I've bought many, many things that I never ended up using and just sat in my closet because I never felt they looked good on me. So it's actually very practical to get a sense of what works. In the long run, I guess you save money because you end up using what you have instead of buying more things, right? So the little workshop that we are going to begin our class with tonight is based on Carol Jackson's book, Color Me Beautiful. We are going to try to determine our seasons and thus figure out which colors look good on us. Now, of course, this is really a large, complex subject. It's something, if you go get your colors done, it could take hours. So obviously, we're only touching the surface of it, but it does give us a good idea. And aside from being practical, being that we're talking about clothing tonight and fashion, it's also a nice introduction to some of the ideas that we will be exploring tonight and discussing at length. So, as I mentioned before, there are 3 things we need to determine in order to figure out our season. Number 1 is the undertone of our skin. Number 2 is our hair color, and number 3 is our eye color. Now, the most complicated step here is determining our undertone, the undertone of our skin. Undertone, as opposed to overtone, is determined by 3 elements present in our blood, in our body, which are hemoglobin, carotene, and melanin. Those are the 3 elements that determine our undertone, our skin undertone. And whereas our skin overtone can change, suntan, sun exposure, illness, blood pressure fluctuations, our skin undertone is genetic. Nothing, it's not affected by any external factor.
What was the third? Hemoglobin, keratin, and
Melanin.
melanin?
Melanin. So in order to determine if you are a warm tone or a cool tone, which is important to know when figuring out your season,
Same cheek or no different cheeks?
doesn't matter.
What is this then?
And then,
Sorry.
what were you
Very
asking?
sensitive skin, so I'm
It's,
reluctant.
so you might not want, it's a cheap foundation, so it might not be great for your skin.
The under part of your arm is too.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that there as well. When you're ready, when you have it rubbed in, take a look in the mirror. The color that just blends right into your skin would be your skin tone, as opposed to the one that just kind of looks painted on. Okay, there will be one that kind of just sits there, that's like, looks like you painted it, and one that really becomes part of your skin. Okay, see which one does which.
If I ever thought I'd be going to a class like this, I wouldn't. Maybe this is like since grade 7.
This looks artificial.
Malky, can you hand the Kleenex?
Yes, actually, that's why I put it here, so I figured everyone's going to need it for this workshop.
Yellow, yeah, I would have thought. This is okay, good. So, anything new?
Isn't it interesting, almost automatically,
That's yellow.
this one here is like, oh.
Yeah, this one on me.
So Natalia, which one do you feel works better for you? Which one is that?
The yellow one.
The warm tone?
Yeah, the yellow
Interesting.
one.
You also a warm tone?
Yeah,
The cool one.
You the cool one?
me too.
Me too.
See, that's the
I didn't put it on now, but the cool, I've tried it before. I do better with the cool
I
one.
find it in between,
The
but
pink
I
one.
put it on my arms.
See, that's what I think of this person that I saw there. I think his
I don't
color
like that one.
didn't agree with what he,
No, this
the
one.
yellow
Yeah.
made him handsome.
There you go.
And the rest,
You're not
he was
sensitive.
an old man. I couldn't
You'll see when we look at the color palettes.
Doesn't matter.
Oh,
Okay, let's move on to the next skin test. The gold and the silver. Okay, if you are warm, if you have warm skin tone, your hand will look better on the yellow paper, as opposed to if you have cool skin tone, your hand will look better on the silver. So take a piece of silver, a piece of gold, put one hand on each, and see on which paper your hand sort of blends in better, as opposed to looking kind of mottled and off. Welcome, class number 5 of Art and Soul. So as you know, we've been exploring various art forms in the context of Judaism and its relevance to our own lives. And tonight we will continue with the exploration, and we will be taking a look at clothing, at fashion, the art of fashion. Clothing can change all the time. We change our clothes with the weather, the season, perhaps with the fashions that come and go. But at the same time, despite the seeming superficial aspect to clothing, the fact that we always, we put on clothes, take them off, we discard clothing, we buy new clothing, and we don't even think about it. Nonetheless, clothing has a very strong impact on us. It really affects how we perceive ourselves, how others perceive us.
wow.
And that's what we will be looking at further, in a deeper sense, tonight. We'll begin with a little workshop. A woman by the name of Carol Jackson wrote a book that became quite famous called Color Me Beautiful. Is anyone familiar with this book? It came out in the 80s and became a very popular read with women. What it is she took the ideas of a woman named Suzanne Cagle, who was a color theorist. And she had done a whole work of applying different seasons, different personalities. It was quite complex. Carol Jackson, who herself is a psychologist, took this work and simplified it, applying one personality per season and developing a system how women can figure out which season they are based on coloring, skin tone, hair color, eye color. And once a woman can figure out her season, then she knows what colors look best on her because there's certain colors associated with each season, and it makes shopping for clothing, for makeup, for accessories that much easier, and you're more guaranteed to buy something